Welcome everyone, this is Denny with my YouTube channel Why Is This True? And joining me today is Ray McCrea, who found Get Wisdom, relatively speaking, a long time ago. In fact, he found Karl's work before there was a Get Wisdom, so he's going to be kind of a valuable addition to this little series of interviews that we've been doing. So I'm going to let Ray introduce himself and give us a little background and maybe some of the story about how he discovered Karl and then later Get Wisdom. Thanks,
All right.
Ray.
Okay, well, I guess I started thinking about ETs and UFOs and all that when I was 13 years old. My parents discovered a channeler who actually was channeling people that had never lived on planet Earth. So, and of course, this is, if you've been involved with Get Wisdom, mostly you would be kind of worried about that because there are a lot of ETs out there we'd rather not contact. But these were beings that have never lived on Earth and were high beings. Remind me a little bit of the Pleiadians with Barbara Marciniak.
Mm.
So they basically were just giving spiritual advice and so forth through this channeler. Louise Morse was her name back in the late 50s and the early 60s.
Wow.
And so my parents got into that really early because of the Edgar Cayce materials. They read a lot of Edgar Cayce stuff. I read it all. And I really got into it 13, 14, 15. By the time I was 15, I was really interested in the UFOs, wondered what that was all about. And I wanted to even actually try to figure out what their drive mechanism was. And that was the thing that I thought that was my life's work, But as I thought more about it and looked into it, I realized, I spent a couple of years doing a lot of thinking about that and reading everything I could find on it. And this is in the early 60s. There was stuff from Adamski and Howard Menninger and various people like that. And I knew there was some kind of energy source that was, if we could learn how to use that, it would be incredible. But then it just dawned on me, all of a sudden in my own head, oh my gosh, if I figured this out, our military would get a hold of it and then they'd start killing people with it. So I immediately stopped trying to figure it out. As much as I wanted to know, I knew that it'd be bad news. Now, I didn't know then that our military already had it. They've already got that information. But so I went on to other avenues. And I continued to wonder about these ETs and UFOs, and I was studying everything I could get my hands on over the years. And then it sort of faded out. In the 60s, I remember when the Condon report came out. They basically poo-pooed the whole thing, said it was just, nothing to worry about. There wasn't anything going on. And that really frustrated me. I was in college then.
Okay.
66.
66?
66.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
That was when the Condon report came out. And
Okay.
Then they stopped the Project Blue Book, I guess a couple of years later, 68, I think it was.
Okay.
So I was just, I was kind of disappointed because I really wanted these people to know about, everybody to know about the UFOs and ETs. I thought they were good. All this information that I had back then was that they were good because this Louise Morse, she had a bias that they were good, like most of us have had in the past. And she used to read the Bible before she would go into her channeling. She'd read it for about 30 minutes before she actually started channeling. So she was really based on Christian, beneficial stuff. So,
Well, that's interesting because a lot of the Christian people who've looked into this would say, well, she's corrupted because the ETs are actually demons. So why is she reading? If she's reading the Bible, she's misreading the Bible, right? And it's like, it's the cleverness of the corruption of the Bible that I think is fed so much of this, because two people can read the Bible and come away with completely different perspectives on it. So she read the Bible, felt that whoever she was contacting was not of this earth and benevolent, and you find somebody else who reads the Bible in that same period of time even, and they'll say, "Oh no, well that these are demons." And in fact, in the channeling work, we've even had the I'm not sure which channeling it was, but I think I heard Karl refer to a channeling and say, "Well, the Bible's actually a whistleblower's document."
Yes, yeah, and that's true. The thing that she would usually read would be stuff from the New Testament about Jesus's work and everything.
Right.
And so it was about all the healing he did and all those those things. In fact, this group that I was with and I sat in on when I was like 15 would find people who had died and were stuck. They
Okay.
were stuck in the lower astral, and we actually did spirit rescues for them.
Okay.
Even back then, which was pretty amazing. That's why I knew when I ran into Karl, when I found out what he was doing, that it was genuine, because we were helping people then. They would say, find somebody that you know that has died and look for them, and they will help get you to the light.
Wow.
And that was what was going on back in 1959.
Whatever happened to her?
Well, I was involved in getting her messages out with mimeograph machines. We didn't have an internet or anything then. My mother taught herself how to type, and she typed this stuff up, and then we would mimeograph it and send it out to people on the mailing list, and it was just word of mouth and everything. So there were maybe 200 or 300 people on the mailing list, and I actually ran that for a while up until the early 70s. I was the one that was responsible for getting the materials out.
Yeah.
But it sort of faded out for me back about the time I got married in 1970.
And she stopped channeling, or what?
Yeah, well, her channeling, as it got, the early channeling was really high vibration stuff. But as the time went on, it didn't inspire me as much. And near the end there, I felt like she, now looking back on it, she was probably getting corrupted in some way so that it wasn't the same high beings.
Okay.
It's very interesting. So I just decided not to do it anymore, and I left, and I don't know what happened to her. In fact, I did check with Karl, and she did go to the light.
Yeah.
She died and went to the light.
Do you know when she died? Roughly?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've not heard. I might find that out in the future here.
Yeah. I mean, it's curious because, the channeling thing has kind of blossomed. And back then, I mean, she was, Casey and her and, there's a handful of other people that are, broke a lot of ground.
Absolutely.
And
so that affected my whole life. I mean, literally the materials that were coming through her were so inspiring for me that it kept me going my whole life and still looking for what was going on. And finally, and so then when I lived a little side trip here, I got a job that took me to Europe, and I built my own airplane and all that kind of stuff. And I lived in Europe for a while, and then I got a job in South Africa. And when I got back from South Africa, it was 6 years out of the country, I learned about the Disclosure Project. That was right around 2002.
Okay.
And Stephen Greer and all of the hearings and so forth.
Yeah.
Thought, something is coming out. Something's finally happening. And so I followed that, and I really got into the disclosure stuff then. And with the David Wilcock and the Corey Good stuff, and Stephen Greer, I thought he was the real thing and really cool. Well, he's the real thing, all right, but I'm not sure that I want to be following him. Let's put it this way. And so then I was on the internet all the time, and I watched all the David Wilcock stuff and all the Corey Good stuff, and I was just, really into this disclosure stuff. And then something popped up on YouTube. Why is this true? Denny Hunt guy. And about that time, I've been reading about William Tompkins. In fact, I bought his book.
Okay.
And William Tompkins was telling about how he was anybody that knows about this, he was involved with getting the information from the Nazis through our spies about that they were working with ET. So anyway, his boss was Rick Oboda, Rear Admiral Rick Oboda.
Right.
And so I look over there, and here on the sidebar here for YouTube was this Denny Hunt and Karl Mollison channeling Rick Oboda. And I thought, oh. Now, my first thought was,
oh.
Well, the thing was, I've seen channelers over the years, and I've never been impressed with them. I've never been impressed with any channeler since Louise Morse back then.
Wow.
And so I thought, well, here's another one. Let's just see what's this. I was very skeptical.
Yeah, because this would have been about 2016 or 2017 somewhere.
2017. In fact, it was in April of 2017.
Okay, all right.
It was right after Boda had been channeled, and
okay.
So it was like the third person you channeled.
Yeah. No, that was really early.
Very early on.
Yeah, very early.
And when I saw it, and I saw Karl go into his trance, and he starts talking, I knew instantly this guy is real. I mean, it's one of those intuitive things. I
Yeah,
can't see how I knew,
yeah.
but I was impressed. And
Yeah, I
so,
mean, it's an important thing to prove out to mention, especially for people who are not familiar with Carl and whatnot, and especially we should say this given that you've been in the having an interest going back and channeling. Probably, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody like yourself who'd been into channeling this long. I
yeah,
don't think there's a lot, very many people like yourself out there. Really, that's my belief. So, but the thing is that we're probably never going to be able to prove that Carl is a genuine, uncorrupted channeler. I mean, it's not.
no,
I mean, most people's criteria for proof, it's just not. It's not going to be there, and there's a reason for that. And
yeah,
we've written about it. You can go check it out. It's called the problem with false channeling. And it's a
yep,
book by Karl Mollison. It's a free ebook. You can go check it out and read about that. And it's an interesting story. It makes sense, but most people actually will never get that far. They'll say, "Oh, that's interesting. There's a book about it." They'll never read the book, and they'll never push the inquiry further to be able to make the determination for themselves whether he's authentic or not. And that's just the world we live in. Yeah. Anyway, I had to
well,
get that out there.
Denny, that uh, as you probably know, I've listened to every channeling that's been published on Get Wisdom at least 3 times.
Yeah, right. That might be another thing that
I'm a
you've got
fanatic
to.
because every time I listen to one, there is new stuff that I missed before. That I didn't miss, but it just jumps out at me. So
Yeah, same
the
here.
first time I hear it's usually when it's posted late at night on Saturday night, and I'm sort of falling asleep while I'm listening to it.
Yeah,
And then the next day, when I'm a little more alert, I listen to it again while I'm driving or something. I download it and so forth. And so each time something new comes out, and I'm telling you, it's incredible. It's a very consistent message. The thing that really gets to me is that this is perfect English. I mean, everything is channeled. It's just all it needs is just commas and semicolons and periods, and
and capitalization. Yep,
it's
that's it.
absolutely perfect. And
Yeah.
I've never heard anything like that before. It doesn't need any editing. So anyway, I could go on and on about that, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is the message that comes through.
Okay, so you heard Rico Boda.
I heard Rico Boda, and I said, this is real. And so then I started following every channel, and you were doing like 2 a week, I think, back then.
Yeah, we were doing a lot.
It was amazing. And about that time, you see, I was following you two, Denny, and you were getting ready to go to the to that UFO conference, the Contact in the Desert.
Oh,
Remember?
yeah.
That was, and so that was. I decided I would go there too. So I
Oh, that's right.
the plane and I flew there, and I thought, well, I'll meet Denny there because I hadn't met you yet. I had been following you,
Right.
but I hadn't met you. So I think, once I realized this, I realized, my gosh, the message from Get Wisdom is completely different from all these other people in the disclosure. And Denny's going to be like this guy, an outlier there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I went there. I wanted to sort of support you. Of course, I'd never met you before or anything, but I wanted to be there because I agreed with what was coming through Carl. By then, I already knew this was genuine and that there are problems with the ETs. And so it was very interesting. I met some interesting people there.
Yeah, that was a crazy place. I mean,
it was.
yeah.
I'm glad I did it. I actually met Michael Tellinger, who I've read his books too. He wrote Slave Species of the Gods, which is amazing how much information he has in there about what's going on here. We really are a slave species that comes out.
Yep.
So I met him and got to have a little breakfast with him and so forth, and that was good. So after that, I just followed all the Get Wisdom and
well, then late, I think was it in July is when I think Brian took the class from Carl in Chicago, and that was 2017. And then we ran this thing up the flagpole about starting to get wisdom. And then Carl came out in February 2018 to Petaluma and taught the class, the LHP class.
Right. And that's what I was in that class. Also, before after I met you at Contact in the Desert, you were having your meditations at your house, and since I live
Yeah.
fairly close to you, I went there to the meditations. And
Yeah,
well,
and
they
this is
were
great because this is one of the things like in this transitional period. I mean, there's so many humbling experiences, and that was one of them. It's like I mean, humbling in hindsight. So I look back and I go,
yeah,
"Oh shit! Look how naive I was.
yeah.
Look, I mean, look how deluded I was about some of these things that I was looking at." And but it gives credit number one to mind control, credit also to the various people who are also subjected to this mind control and actually can propose a fairly plausible scenario for this whole disclosure thing. It has traction.
Oh, it really does, and I think that it takes a lot of gumption to get out from under that enough to be able to see what's really going on.
Yeah,
And I think that a lot of people that stick with Get Wisdom through and through are ones that have been doing this kind of stuff for many lifetimes.
yeah,
That's my understanding. That's my feelings about it. But we've done a lot of stuff in spiritual searches or that kind of stuff. And it turned out I did some deep subconscious channelings that I was abducted in another lifetime, and they did implants in my skull, and they ruined me. They blinded me. I was blind for like 12 years because of
in
all
that
the,
incarnation, you were blinded. You're like
yeah,
no
yeah.
eyesight. Okay.
They manipulated me, and finally they did some kind of manipulation which killed me.
Okay.
So and then the interesting thing about that is in the deep subconscious channeling that was done, which we could get into. That's another whole thing. But
Yeah.
One of the questions they ask is how many other lifetimes you've had where similar things had occurred.
Yeah.
And the answer blew me away because it was, well, there would be fill 2 large airplane hangars 4 stories high.
Well, that was okay. That's the feelings.
Yes.
The negative. If you piled up all the feelings.
If you piled up all
but there is a number with associated life incarnations. Do you remember what that number was?
You mean that we normally have had?
Well, no. So in the deep subconscious channeling trauma resolution, there's a question in there. Is like how many of your former selves had a similar. Do you remember what that?
That's what it was. How many former selves? And it was enough to fill up 2 airplanes.
No. You're confusing that with how big the pile is. How big is the feel? If you were to pile up all the feelings, right, all the negative feelings,
okay,
and then that's the description of the pile. There's another question that is related to each trauma that's reframed in the session, and then you get a number like how many previous lifetimes, and what we typically get is like 40 or 50 lifetimes that are thematically related to the trauma that's actually reframed. So it's probably some number like that, which is huge because you're talking about, anywhere from 5 to 20% of all the lifetimes that you've had on Earth, where there's significant trauma.
Yeah, and so the thing is that what it told me was I've had this incredible drive to find out what's going on and to let people know why these ETs are here, what the UFOs are about. I thought I knew when I was really young.
Yeah.
But I think I've found out finally what they're really about. But it's because of that drive and probably because of all these experiences I had in the past that made me want to bring this out in the open.
It's like a soul mission.
It's my soul mission.
Yeah.
And it has been ever since I was like 15. So when I ran into Karl, I realized I had like 40 years where it was kind of like just a blank period there where I wasn't able to do anything about it. And then I discovered it. And so this is like the last 4 or 5 years. It's been incredible. So I have nothing but good to say about Get Wisdom.
So you found Karl before there was a Get Wisdom, and Get Wisdom I think started in, I don't know, it was like May of 2018 after the class.
Right.
And you'd already learned the LHP before Get Wisdom even started.
Yeah, I took that first class that he did out in California. I think it was his second class or third class that he did, but the one in-person one.
Okay, right.
That was the one that when I learned the LHP, and then I started doing those right away, and I've been doing them ever since.
And how's that been for you?
Well, I mean, it's amazing is all I can say. I've had a lot of synchronicities and things like that you could say, well, it's just a coincidence. But there are some coincidences that to me are just absolute proof that there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, you had an accident in your airplane.
Yeah, I had this airplane that I built, and I flew it for 28 years and maintained it. Well, I don't know if anybody's ever maintained an airplane, but it keeps you busy because, you can't screw around and you can't say, well, that's good enough. Because when you're over the mountains, which I flew in 26 countries with my airplane, so you got to make sure it works. And it was just getting old, working on it all the time. I wanted to do something, but I didn't want to sell it to somebody because I was kind of afraid that if somebody bought it and then they got hurt, I'd feel responsible for it.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do with this thing, So I put a prayer out to Creator. I said, Creator, I got to fix this. I've got to do something about this airplane so I can do something else with my life, like do more LHPs or something. Yeah. So anyway, I went out flying one day and I came back. And it was really strange. The whole flight was strange. Everything wasn't quite right. I should have known something was going to happen. But, when I fueled the plane up, I had two cameras on my airplane, one on the wing and one inside, and I couldn't get either one to work right. And I'd always use them. Something wasn't working. Then when I taxied over to take off, I taxied on the wrong place. I mean, it's like, I've been flying my plane for all these years, so this is unusual.
Yeah.
So then I flew out, did my bay tour over the San Francisco Bay like I like to do, and I came back, and I asked to land on the left runway, and so I rotated, I did my pattern and came in, but then I was lined up with the right runway. What? And I immediately just went over and lined up with the left runway. Just one more thing that wasn't right.
Yeah.
And so, but it worked out okay. And I landed, and I was turning off. And as I was turning off, one of my brakes failed. It failed exactly at the right time, so that I was 45 degrees, just coming off the runway.
Yeah.
And you steer with your brakes,
right.
So you can't steer anymore.
Right.
And there was a sign right there, and so I went right through the sign at about 15 miles an hour or something. And it took off the landing gear. It broke both of my luggage pods, broke the prop, and just went sitting down on the ground on the luggage pods. So in other words, it broke everything, but it didn't break the airframe itself.
Right. Right.
It's repairable, in other words, and
right.
I didn't get hurt.
Yeah. No injuries. It
was such a miraculous. I couldn't have put the airplane in the right place like that if I tried 100 times, because the metal post on the sign scraped the side of the fuselage, but it didn't hit the fuselage. In the middle of the sign, the luggage pod went right through the sign and tore out the plexiglass, but it didn't hurt the airplane. It broke things that had to be repaired. So anyway, there it was sitting on the grass. I got it back. It was in the runway right next to my hangar, so it was very easy to use a forklift to lift it up and put it back in the hangar. Didn't hurt. So anyway, to make a long story short, that was in my hangar sitting without the landing gear on sawhorses for a year. And so the next February came along, and I said, okay, Creator, that's great that you got rid of the airplane so I can do other things now. But I want to sell this thing and get it to somebody that really knows what to do with it. So I want this thing to be out of here by the end of February. And I want the right person to get it. I want it to stay in the hangar, be in my club, and stay right here so that they can rebuild it and do it right here. And I want somebody who knows what they're doing. Well, the last day of February, the guy who's the president of our club came in with this guy. He's a Russian guy. He's been here for 7 years. And the guy had told the president of my flying club that he wanted to fly in a long easy, but he didn't want to build one from scratch, but he'd like to find one. He'd love to have one. And my friend said, "Oh, I know just the place." So he brought him into my hangar, and we started talking, and well, we made the deal. So it was basically done on the last day of February, just like I asked.
Right.
It was literally, I got exactly what I asked for in both of those cases.
Yeah.
Now, these are miracles to me that I can't prove to anybody else.
Right.
But it's like they had it all lined up. They know how to go back in time, the divine realm, Creator, and they can manipulate things so that it happens exactly right.
Yeah.
And now that we've learned more about how all this stuff works, it makes perfect sense to me. When especially the ETs can time travel, why can't Creator?
Yeah.
So that's how miracles happen. They can go back in time and make stuff happen.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. See. Yeah. And I had some personal experiences with the retrocausal healing. That's what we call it. And I think I can't speak for Karl, but when we were initially, we turned the LHP into an online course so that you could go to getwisdom.com and actually not have to attend the class that Karl teaches. You could actually get the manual, read the manual. There's some video modules on there and a bunch of LHP webinars that are very informative. And but at the time, we saw and we knew about some retrocausal healing, but we didn't think it was like part and parcel, like something that happened a lot. It was kind of like anomalous in some cases, But we found out later that it's not anomalous at all. This is rather a routine part of the LHP.
It's the way it's done.
Yeah, and I had a situation with my mother who had a pretty serious health problem. Probably would have killed her, and she lived the vast majority of her elder life alone in her house. And she decided to have a tenant in an extra room there during the time that this aneurysm occurred. And so, given the fact that this person was in the house, one of her foster daughters, we found out later that was prearranged as a result of the LHPs that were done, and that's why her life was saved. Stuff like that. So, very poignant, very, that could hit close home to me, close to home for me. And now, I've come to accept that that's something. So you could, like, for instance, that airplane accident could have totally destroyed the plane and ended your life.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah. And, well, the LHPs, I think, I even asked about it in one of the, in my higher self channeling that I had done that Karl did for me, and about all the flying that I've done over, I flew that airplane over 26 countries. I flew from Holland to the tip of Africa. I flew down Africa with my airplane. And there are a lot of things that could have gone wrong in a lot of places that I've been. Yeah. But I think the LHPs that I've done recently retrocausally went back and made sure that nothing did go wrong. Yeah. Now, we can't prove any of that, but I'm telling you, I had a lot of good luck over all those years of that airplane. Yeah. So, anyway, that's... sorry, there was my alarm.
It's all right. So your flying days are over. Is that right?
Yeah, I decided I'm not going to fly anymore. I've had a great time all of these years, and I said, I know that the ETs don't like the work that we're doing, and it's ridiculous to put yourself at more risk, and flying is risky, and that's one way that people can be gotten rid of, is to make an accident happen or something. So I decided I'm not flying anymore.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit, because it's kind of like you're kind of like bringing up this idea like it's a partnership. So you got to do your part, Yeah. And so your part in this case is to make yourself less vulnerable.
Right.
But there's other things you probably do too.
Well, of course, doing LHP is very important in the Lightworker Healing Protocol. That to me is and just trying to lead a life that a lot of times I use, like, well, what would Jesus do? I know that's something that some people might not get out of. But, when you're doing something and if you have a reaction that you probably aren't proud of, when you think about it, well, that's not the way if I'm in divine alignment, I'm not going to react like that. Oh, okay. So I try to do that. Of course, every day is a challenge. Yeah. When you're driving.
Yeah, it's always easier said than done. Yeah.
Easier, yeah. So anyway, every day I try to do that. But the LHPs, of course, and also anybody that I know, I'm always trying to introduce them to this. I have to say that's what I do wherever I am. And of course, I've done that in some places where I shouldn't. Looking back on it, like when I met that hybrid.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
One time I flew my airplane to Sun Valley like I do every year to fly up to some music festival that I go to every year. And Jeremy and I, the concert master who also built his plane, he and I flew our planes there, and we landed there at Haley, Idaho, where we park our planes. And there was a woman sitting in there that she was just by herself, had a little bag and stuff. And then she asked, well, are you going north up to Haley or up to Sun Valley? And we said, yeah, well, we're going up that way. So she asked for a ride. So we said, yeah, we'll give you a ride. Anyway, it's a long story, but the fact is this woman, there was something strange about her. She was like in her 20s, And both Jeremy and I just got this strange feeling about her. I don't know how to describe it, but there were we had discussions and conversations. We asked her, where she lived and everything, and she had these vague answers and all these places that she'd done. She had a PhD in something. Here she's in her 20s. And it just didn't add up, a lot of the stuff she was telling us.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, to make a long story short, I finally decided she wanted us to drop her off up there at a trailhead out in the middle of nowhere.
From the airport?
Yeah, from the airport. On the way up, as we were driving north, there was this trailhead on the way to where I was dropping Jeremy off.
Yeah.
And she wanted us to drop her off there. And we got there, and there was like nobody there. And we thought, well, how are you going to get back? What are you going to do? She says, oh, well, there are usually people that come and go. I can get a ride back. And we thought, we really didn't feel good about this. Dropping a young woman off out in the middle of nowhere, and she's just going to go walking off into the forest. So we just decided, well, we don't really want to do that. Why don't you go with us? We'll drop Jeremy off, and I'll take you back down to where I got you, and you can do something else. So anyway, she did. So I dropped Jeremy off, and then I had a conversation with her on the way back down to Haley, which is about 15 miles.
So you took her back to the airport?
I took her back down to where I picked her up. Or close to where I picked her up. I said, where do you want me to drop you off? So she told me this place, which is not right at the airport, but near there. And so I dropped her off there, and she wanted to go to the rehearsal of the concert that day. And I said, well, I'll pick you up at 12:30. The rehearsal's at 1, and I don't want you to be late because I don't want to miss the beginning because they always go all the way through the music each time, and I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
So I went back to pick her up when she at 12:30, and she wasn't there. I looked all around, and to make a long story short, I saw certain people that were there. There were some people in a pickup truck and so forth, but she wasn't there. So finally I gave up. I didn't have her phone number. I couldn't call her, so I just decided, well, she didn't make it. So I started driving back, and I got halfway up to where the concert was, and my phone rang. I guess I'd given her my phone number, but she hadn't given me hers. So She called me and said, where were you? And I said, well, I was right there. And she said, well, I was there too. And well, how could that be? And she described the people that I saw when I was sitting there looking for her. Yeah. So she was looking at the same scene I was looking at, but she wasn't there. So I thought, oh, that's kind of strange. I was there. I looked everywhere. You weren't there. So anyway, we said, okay, fine. So I went up and I was sitting listening to the rehearsal.
So did you go back and pick her up?
No.
Oh, okay.
So it's too bad. She missed it. I'm going to rehearsal.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway, I went to the rehearsal, and I'm sitting there listening to the music, and somebody taps me on my shoulder, and it's her. She's behind me, sitting behind me. Oh, I said, oh, well, I'm glad you got here. So anyway, she was listening to the music, and then about a half an hour later, she says, oh, I have to go pee. I'm gonna leave. I'll be back. She never did come back. So that was my first encounter with her, and Jeremy and I both had some really strange. When I talked to her going down towards Haley, I started telling her about Get Wisdom. You know how I am.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I ever think about.
Yeah.
And so here I am talking to this person who I later found out was a human gray hybrid, because she was so strange that I sent Karl an email. I said, Karl, I ran into this person.
And a picture.
Huh?
And there's a picture too. You had a picture.
Yeah. And I said, there's something strange about this person. Can you tell me, is this person a human?
Yeah.
And Karl came back. He actually checked with Creator. Right. And Creator said, no, this person has no soul. This is a human alien hybrid.
Yeah. So for clarification, if nobody ever heard of this, the Arcturians created the Greys, what's known as the Greys. Right. The Greys are a biological robot, if you will, and they're a soulless being, very interested in obtaining through DNA what humans have, which is a soul and the ability to reincarnate, whatever. So they're very successful with this infiltration using human ET hybrids, human gray hybrids. So when you cross a human with a gray, you get a being that doesn't have a soul. And if someone's really interested in this, besides what we talk about it, Get Wisdom, you could check out Dr. David Jacobs' books, Aliens Among Us, or whatever it's called. I did an interview with the guy, but he's actually done like 30 years of research on this. Pretty academic approach to this whole phenomenon of hybrids, if you will, and this idea that we're being infiltrated. But I don't know I don't know anyone myself. I mean, I know a lot of other things about stuff that's related to this, but I've never really encountered anyone who had an experience like you with kind of like a prolonged contact episode with somebody like this. And, you know, the question comes up, well, there must have been some interest in you with this being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and of course I spilled the beans all about, you know, the whole story about Get Wisdom in 10 minutes, 15 minutes that we had driving down there. So here I am talking to this human alien hybrid, telling him about what I know about them and talking to one. This was really smart, wasn't it? So the thing is that she showed up I was there for 3 weeks. I always go for 3 weeks. And she showed up at various times where I was. She showed up. I went to a bar to eat with some of the musicians, and she shows up with one of the musicians. And I'd never seen her without her sunglasses. That's the other thing. She always had sunglasses on, but this was in a bar at night. And so I got a sort of a picture of her. She was sitting next to me, and my friend was sitting across from me. So I took a picture of him, and I had her in the side. I didn't want to be obvious about taking a picture of her, but I did get a photograph. She just looked like a young, partial Asian mixling, you know, a person that's mixed Caucasian and Asian.
Yeah.
And so at the bar, you know, by then I had gotten my reply from Karl that this was an alien. I already knew she was an alien now. And I thought, uh-oh, here she is showing up with me again.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I didn't know that you knew this already.
I thought you
found out afterwards.
This happened a couple days after our initial encounter. And also it turned out Jeremy, she went to some party that Jeremy was at in between that time. So Jeremy had another encounter with her also.
And what's Jeremy's take on this Get Wisdom stuff and the fact that she's could be a hybrid? I mean, did Jeremy buy this?
Well, I had an hour conversation with him after all this happened, because I'd ran into her a couple other times, and she would show up where I was before I got there. Like I cut out on one of the rehearsals because I didn't like the music, and it was about halfway through it, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no place open to eat. I was hungry, and so I drove down to Haley. I knew there was a Thai place that was open, and so I went down there and walked in the Thai place. There's nobody else in there, pretty much. And I said, he says, where do you want to sit? And so I said, well, over by the window there. And then somebody behind me says, oh, do you want to join me? It's her. She's sitting there before I got there.
Yeah.
So what do I say? Well, what can I say? No, you're a hybrid. I don't want to. But I said, oh, okay. So I joined her, and I sat across from the table, and we had small talk. And I said something about I liked something seasoning in the food. And she said, oh, yeah, my mother used to make something like that. That's interesting. I said, well, where's your mother? Oh, well, it's in Houston. So she had all these places that she said she was from. One of them was in Texas. And, you know, from what I've learned about these hybrids is a lot of times they will implant these beings into the women, and the women don't know that they've got a hybrid, and they raise this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid is just trying to learn how to be a human.
Yeah.
And they learn a lot of our nuances and so forth, but there's something missing.
Something missing.
I can't tell you what it is, but you know, I don't.
Well, it's a soul, but it manifests in different ways.
Yeah. But
right.
you know, I'm intuitive, but I only find out later that I was intuitive. I never know in advance. So there was something about that woman that just wasn't right. And Jeremy, I had a conversation with him, a very long one. We tried to review everything we knew about her.
Yeah.
And he went on. I told him the whole story about how these things are made and everything.
Yeah.
And he was very interested. And I sent you a copy of that.
Yeah, which I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to look at that.
Well, if you get a chance to listen to it, you'll see what I mean. He was very interested in hearing what I had to say.
Okay.
Because he knew there was something really strange, and so he went along with it. So that was cool. There was one other time that she ran into me, Oh yeah, there was the restaurant, there was the bar, and then there's that. Yeah. So after the restaurant thing, I didn't run into her anymore. Thank goodness, because I was there for 3 weeks, and
Right.
I wondered when I'd run into her again and what she was up to, how she
Yeah.
got around. She didn't have a car or anything, but she would just show up someplace. And I'm wondering if they used a transdimensional transport to drop her down from a ship someplace. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
Interesting stuff.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's just,
yeah, and interestingly enough, you see a lot of things like this. Maybe not for someone involved with Get Wisdom, but I call it mind candy, and it's like there's all these very intriguing experiences and things to investigate and stuff, and then, but the problem for someone who's discovered Get Wisdom, I think many times is, well, what would you do differently if you knew the answer? And it's like
yeah,
we know what the problem is and we know what the solution is. But
right.
it's very hard in the environment that we live in is to stay focused on that. You know?
Yeah.
Like me myself, and I know some other people that we both know together, we're very interested in introducing this to other people through conventional means. And it's largely predominantly unsuccessful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you talk to 100 people, you might get one or two that
One
will
or two.
actually give you the time of day. The rest
Yep.
of them, you just see the curtains coming down, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be entertained in any serious fashion whatsoever.
And
And
even
so,
people that show me an interest, if it can fade out pretty quickly. In other words,
oh yeah,
oh yeah, they're interested at the moment, but then you
yeah.
never hear another thing about it.
Which oftentimes is a matter of being polite, or trying
Yeah,
to, they're making
could
a
be.
genuine attempt to treat you the way they would like to be treated, but there's
Right.
no genuine interest. So we encounter this all the time. So what's the answer? Well, we do an LHP for them, and that's where the rubber meets the road. But
Yep.
that is also kind of like for the human experience, a very unsatisfying episode in a way, because it's like you launch your prayer and then you go off and make breakfast or take the garbage out, and you never find out whether
Yeah.
So it's the
Yeah.
ultimate act of faith. But this is a problem that we all have. I have it. You have it. A lot of us have it. We want to get the word out, and we want to have an exchange on on a social media site or on the phone or at work with our friends or something like that. And it's just that feedback, that needing to belong, or it's like I liken it to, like, what if you were out walking one day and you found a cave full of gold, more gold than you could ever spend in your whole life. Well, most of us would want to share that with somebody. This wonderful discovery that's changed your life, permanently. We want to share that with somebody, right? That's just the
Yeah.
human nature, and so that's the curse and the blessing of someone who's found Get Wisdom, I think.
Yeah, and well, my gosh, the thing that I do when I try to introduce it to somebody, I say, okay, now this stuff might sound really far out to you, and I don't expect you to believe me, but let me just tell you some things that I think are going on, and you just put them in the back of your mind, go on with your life, don't worry about it. But as things start happening around you, and maybe if you actually hear that these ETs are starting to come out and tell us they know how to run our world, because we sure don't, then remember what I told you. They don't know how to run our world. They've been running our world, and that's why it is the way it is. So just keep that in, just put that in the back of your mind. And so I tell people to just put it in their computer, basically.
Yeah.
And just file it away. And it may be useful information later. That's I try.
It's
to
kind of
get
like
that.
the planting the seed approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so then I say, I don't expect you to believe me, but just file it away.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe that will help in the future when things start really changing.
Yeah. So, okay, the other thing I want to ask you about is that, Karl found out years ago that in one of his previous incarnations, he was Allan Kardec, who was the founder of the Spiritist movement. And the Spiritist movement is really big in Brazil, where they speak Portuguese. And unlike a lot of other large countries that don't speak English, there's not a lot of people in Brazil that speak English. In fact, you'd be except for China, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find another country like Brazil with such a huge population and so few of them knowing English.
Yeah.
But the Spiritism really caught on there, and they've got some psychic mediums that kind of became the poster boys for the Spiritist movement over the years since Kardec's death. So Kardec was a French physician that lived back in the 1800s, very skeptical fellow, very kind of had a scientific approach to things, much like Karl. And even in Kardec's book, the Spiritist book, which I have here somewhere, sometimes I can grab it and show it. But oh, here it is. This is what they call the Luknos version, which is allegedly the best English translation of his primary book, Allan Kardec, called the Spiritist book. And anyway, this is really interesting because if you look at the Divine Wisdom database, it almost looks like this book. It's a question and answer format. It's organized the same way Karl would do it, pretty much.
Yeah.
But here we go, this discovery, and even this has fallen on deaf ears, so to speak. We've made an outreach to the what we would hope to be the interested parties, and it's not going anywhere. And this has been over a year now.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's what we're up against here. My gosh, the mind control is really powerful, and that's really what it is. They've got this technological mind control that they're blanketing the planet with, as well as their psychic powers. And wow, people it goes right in one ear and out the other. They just can't look at it. The smile goes on their face. When you say ETs, a smile, oh, he's one of them. A smile comes on their face, and that's it.
Yeah. Now, prior to this coming out, did you know about Allan Kardec? Did you know about him?
No, I'd never heard of him.
Yeah, I hadn't either.
Not until I think you mentioned in one of the sessions that maybe he was Allan Kardec, and so yeah, I didn't know anything about Allan Kardec. It was mostly Edgar Cayce materials and of course the Louise Moore stuff. And in fact, I was able to preserve some of that. I had the original recordings from 1959 that I was able to digitize. And,
wow!
And I put them. I actually made files of them. I got about 25 or 30 of those channeling sessions.
I think you sent them over to. I have them too. I've listened to a few of them. Yeah.
It is very interesting. It's very spiritually oriented, and I asked Karl about was this channel actually channeling who they said they are, and he checked with Creator. Sure enough, they were channeling. They just didn't have the reach because, of course, of the limitations of the channeler. That's always a limitation.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was that's what sort of drove my life for my whole life until I ran into Gut Wisdom or Karl and the channeling. So it's
okay. So on the channeling series, you've listened to all of those at least 3 times. Do you also read? Do you read the transcripts?
We've only got about 100 of them up there. There's another 100 to go. So I have read transcripts, but I actually get more out of just listening to them. I mean, I can read the transcripts, but there's a lot of them that I like to listen to that aren't transcribed yet or haven't been.
And do you listen to them at normal speed?
I do.
You do?
And I listen to them either when I'm driving or when I'm walking or when I'm at home. Whenever I have spare time, I just listen to one of them.
Yeah, for me, if I listen to them, I have to speed them up. And then reading them for me is a completely different experience. It's very markedly different for me, and I actually prefer it. Like if I had the time to actually go through it, like you've gone through it, I probably maybe not right away, but I think down the road I would probably prefer to read it. And I think Karl's the same way. Karl likes to read. I think he taught himself how to speed read. Yeah, I don't speed read, but I usually read like anywhere from 2 to 4 books simultaneously, and I just switch off from each book until I'm done, and I finish one, and I grab another one, and that's how I go. But it's really interesting how people consume this information, and when you do the LHP, you listen to the audio file.
I either do that or I actually made my own audio file.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And or sometimes I just read it. I do it all 3 different ways.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Read it, or I will listen to the audio file, or I'll listen to my own, but I have to make my own because they keep changing them, so I have to make another audio file.
Yeah, that's right. It's updated a lot. It's been updated over 20 times since 2018.
26.
26 times. Yeah, it's
Yep.
amazing.
And so, but the reason I listened to 3 times, well, that's kind of like, when you read, you stop to read something. Well, something goes by and it's in there. And then the next time I listen to it, then I actually get it more powerfully. So it's like you're pausing it, but I'm just listening to it over again.
Yeah.
So I do get it. Like some of the most recent channelings, there was just so many classic lines in there. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
this guy that was the amazing Randy.
Yeah.
There is some stuff in there that is just. I just heard it the third time again yesterday. It's full of just one line after another, just precious stuff. You couldn't think it up in a million years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I could go on and on about it, but that's how I do it. Instead of reading it, one of the other problems is I have problems with my eyes. I have trouble reading now because one of my eyes is not too good, so it makes it more difficult to read.
Okay.
So that's why listening is better.
And do you prefer print books or reading online?
Print books.
You do?
I do, but I do use reading online because it's just more convenient when you.
Do you use Kindle?
Yeah.
You do use Kindle?
Yeah,
okay.
I use Kindle, and I use it either on my computer or on my phone. I have to admit, I do read it on my phone.
Did you ever read the Andy Perro story?
Yeah, Yeah, in fact, there was, you talked about him in one of the channelings. I remember there was some talk about him.
Yeah.
You asked Creator about that.
Oh, yeah.
It might have been one of the Creator channelings, I can't. But anyway, there was, Andy Perro was an amazing, one of those, like a super soldier, right?
Yeah, I mean, and his story is just, it's unbelievable, but it turns out that most of that story is true.
Yeah.
There's a few little anomalous things, but they're practically not worth mentioning. And that was a real eye-opener for me because I had an inkling that it was true, one of the stories that is unbelievable is, apparently it is true. He was dropped from a plane and survived.
Yes, I remember that one. Yeah.
I mean, Anyway.
Well, what this shows me, the stuff that he was able to do. We are incredibly deep, complex beings, and we have capabilities that we can't even imagine. Be quiet, please. It's telling me about the Get Wisdom program coming up.
Oh, it is? Okay, yeah. You have your alerts.
But anyway,
yeah.
What I learned from the hypnosis stuff that I've seen and the stuff that he's done is that we have these capabilities. Humans are unbelievably capable, and we're dumbed down to an amazing degree. And what you see what people can do with their bodies, these athletes,
the Sufis and all that,
and playing instruments the way they do, and so forth. We all have these capabilities, but we generally don't get in contact with them. But it's amazing we're extensions of Creator. So
right. Exactly. Okay, so there was something else I wanted to ask you about. How about some of these accounts? Okay, it's kind of like it's similar to the Andy Perro story. Have you read any of the accounts of the mind control victims like MK Ultra? Like there was the Susan Ford or Bryce Taylor book, Thanks for the Memories. Yeah. There's Elisa E's books about the MK Ultra, Our Life Beyond MK Ultra, and several others.
I've read those. And that's the other thing. It shows the capabilities of what we're capable of. You split off a part of your mind.
And what we're subjected to.
Yeah. Right? I mean, that's being used for nefarious purposes. But just think if we had the capabilities like that without it being nefarious.
Right, exactly.
It would be incredible. I've read those. Who's the other one that wrote Transformation of America? That's
right. Susan, what was her name? I have that book here somewhere.
Yeah.
Another good book that's serves as a kind of an introduction on this whole thing. It's kind of dated now, but very helpful. I think it's at the top of my recommended reading list for mind control. It's this one by Boert, and he was actually a channeling subject. But Walter Boert, he's dead now, but he wrote this book about Operation Mind Control. And it's very well researched, and it's some of the earlier stuff where it kind of put the whole subject on the map, so to speak.
Huh.
So it's Walter Boert. He was one of our channeling subjects. And the other one that I recommend often is Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler, and that's that's this one here. How the Illuminati
Create an
undetectable
something.
Yeah, undetectable total mind controlled slave.
Yeah.
So he's done a lot of the pioneering work. Is from this book, and he's written some other ones. And Cisco Taylor wrote some too, or Cisco Wheeler, and we actually channeled her father, who was a general.
Oh yeah, the general Wheeler. It was his Wheeler. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're really steeped in all this, you could start connecting dots that we aren't really overt about in terms of who's connected to who went where. You know, there's a lot of behind the scenes stories. One of the ones that a lot of people don't know about is the second channeling we did was with a what do they call them, the guys who protect the president, Secret Service agent.
Secret Service agent.
Yeah. And that was me.
Yeah, I know that. I was telling somebody about that, and somebody who's actually familiar with our materials that didn't realize that was you. And here you are asking questions of your higher self or whatever.
Right. And I didn't tell Karl, because this was back in the day when I was still like, he was coming up with some
one. It was the second.
It was the second one. We did Eisenhower, then we did the Secret Service agent, and then we did Forrestal.
Yeah.
And but that was my naivete showing in great form. Because I was testing Karl. I was testing his authenticity. And he handled that like a prince. But he could have said, oh, this guy's a prick. I'm just, I picked the wrong guy. But, and I think he would have been within his rights to do that.
Yeah.
But I was like, I knew I was losing viewers having Karl on. Because we were moving away from this love and light thing. Let's go meditate under the redwood trees, and the ETs are going to be here soon, and da-da-da-da-da. And he was turning that whole thing on its head. But I was very interested in the guy because of the healing that he did on me.
That's the thing that made Karl genuine in my mind, is that he came at it from the healing end, okay?
Always.
He didn't come at it looking to see what these ETs are about or anything.
Exactly.
He just found out about them because they were messing with his clients. And plus he had a little experience. He'd seen one when he was younger, so he knew they were real.
Yep.
So that's where he got, and I think that really makes it more genuine, because he wasn't just trying to figure out what these ETs are all about.
Yeah, or show off his channeling abilities.
Right. No, I mean, he's about healing. He's always about healing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things, I'd say, judge them by their fruits. Yep. And I really didn't see, I mean, the channeling series is probably the only place where you could say there's a departure. But if you really look at that and you see what's happening in the channeling series, you see, well, maybe that doesn't really qualify. But everything else in his channeling world was in service to the healing projects that he had going on. And when I met him, he wasn't channeling Creator. He was channeling the archangels and his father.
Really?
And and those are the questions that he was asking them, was about things that was going on with his clients. So he'd get a client and he would do the LHP and something wasn't working, or he thought maybe he could heal it better or whatever. So he would do these channelings, ask his father, ask the archangels, rephrase the question, and see if he could make an improvement to the LHP so he could help his clients better.
Yeah.
So
another thing, Denny, that I wanted to tell you about that really proved to me that Karl is the genuine item is because when he talks about taking the dark spirits out of people, or taking the fallen angels, who we call the spirit meddlers, they're like what people call demons. Yeah. Well, in the Bible and all these other places, when they talk about getting demons out of people, they talk about sending them to hell or dumping them into the trash. These things are also rehabilitatable. Yeah. That's the thing that blows me away. No matter how far away you've gotten from the source, like the fallen angels are about as deep as you can get. They've lost their free will. They're literally just parasites. They can be redeemed. Now that to me shows the depth of love that Creator has for all of His creation, including even these evil fallen angels.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and that was another in one of our early. We did the Monster of the Andes. Pedro Lopez.
Yes,
who killed an estimation of 500 young girls, raped and killed 500 young girls, and when he died, he went to the light.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute.
What?
You know, I thought this guy would be struggling as an earthbound spirit for a long time, but we find out, you know, that we're finding out how the divine realm works, what the divine realm cares about. And I think that still remains one of the most valuable things about the channeling series, even though
that's the story of the prodigal son, which I know you like that story too.
Oh, yeah, it's my favorite.
That's really what it's about. No matter how far you've gone away from the fold, when you come back, Creator will welcome you back and help you learn the path back.
Yeah.
And so everybody is redeemable, the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And that to me is another thing that shows me that Karl's a genuine item.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so Ray, is there anything else that you want to say before we sign off? And I want to say also that this is true for all the people that I've interviewed. It's, you know, if we come up with something, we say, oh, we should do a follow-up because we didn't talk anything about this. I'm open to that because it's valuable. I mean, you in particular, having had the level of interest that you've had, and the fact that I don't know that anyone has listened to every single of the channeling series 3 times.
Well, like I said, instead of reading it, I listened to it already.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't think I have anything more to add.
Okay.
I told you the general gist of the thing. It's just the most important thing that ever happened to me.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and thank you, Ray, for doing this with me. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be back with another interview soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.